Thank you, Bruhe. So, hi again, everyone, and welcome to today's training. So, this is actually our last session for this year. So, thanks so much for joining us this evening and for all the other sessions that you would have spent with us. And tonight, we have a very exciting topic that I know lots of you are very interested in. Tonight, we are joined by Ope, who is part of our Global 350 team, and she will be sharing some great tips on how to create impactful videos. I won't say much else about her at this time because I know she has some plans to do some introductions herself, so don't want to get ahead of her presentation. So let's give a warm Caribbean welcome to her as I pass the mic over to O.
Hi, everyone. Bienvenido a todos. So today's presentation is about how to tell a story for impact using video. And my name is Obe, and I'm a senior video producer at 350.org. I'm Canadian, but I live right now in central New York State. And my background is in documentary filmmaking, but I love to make all different kinds of videos. And I especially love to tell stories in order to create social change. So I'm curious, I'd love to see who is here in the workshop. So if you would like, you can share your name and where you're from in the chat. And I see that Katrina already said hello from Trinidad and Tobago. So hi, Katrina. Okay, so in this workshop, I'm going to start by going over some basic storytelling building blocks. We're then going to discuss how to develop your own story. And then I'll go over some very basic videography skills. And then we'll talk about distribution, which is all about how to share your story with your audience. And then I'll go over a little optional video assignment that you can do after this workshop if you'd like. And I see Kenya from Grenada. I see Dacia from Trinidad and Tobago. Dylan from Dominica, but living in Trinidad. So hi, everyone, and welcome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what makes a story have impact. So I want you to think back to a story that you heard recently, or maybe a video that you saw on social media or a film. It can be anything, but something that like really made you think differently about something and it made you want to take action. So what I want you to think about is like, why did that story have impact on you? What was it about it that grabbed you? So try to think of just either one word or just a few words. And if you want, you can put them in the chat. And yeah, I'll just give you a few moments to do that. So, okay, I'll move on because I don't see anyone yet in the chat, but I wanted to share this quote with you because for me, this is what is one of the most important things about what makes a story have impact. And so I wanted to share this quote from Maya Angelou because it's one that I use for almost all the stories that I work on, all the video projects that I work on. And so Maya Angelou is an author. She says, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so I just want to stress the importance of the emotional impact that stories can have on us when they really make us feel something, when they touch not just our brains with information, but our hearts as well. And I think oftentimes, like as activists, we sometimes make the mistake that we want to give people so much information which is very important. People need information for sure, but people also need to feel something. And there's new research being done that shows that one of the things that really makes people take action is when they experience a story that has made them feel a strong emotion. And that emotion can be anything. It can be anger, it can be sadness, it can be joy and hope. But all, like, a lot of those emotions will actually lead us to take action, whether they're positive emotions or negative emotions. So I want to go over some approaches to storytelling. And these are just 3 different approaches. There's obviously many more, but these are some that are commonly used. And the first one is called the hero's journey. And it's also often referred to as the 3-act structure. And this is a form of storytelling that you're probably very familiar with, because it's used in Hollywood films, it's used in books, it's used in fairy tales, in plays, in myths. And basically summed up, it starts with the first part where we're introduced to the hero and the hero's world, and all is well in the hero's world. In the second part, a challenges arise that the hero has to face. In the third part, the hero faces that challenge. So maybe it's a battle. Like a classic example is Lord of the Rings, where the hero is in their world, all is well. They have to face a challenge and a battle, and then they return to their world, but they're transformed by the challenge that they faced and the journey that they went on to face that challenge. So this is like a very, very classic narrative structure. Another type of storytelling structure, and Afifa, can you tell me if my can you see the full titles in the slides? Do I need to move the little picture box?
No, everything's clear. We're
Oh,
seeing.
good. Okay. Good. Just because on my end I can't see the title, but perfect. So in the second storytelling model, this one is based on the idea that humans are always in pursuit of a state that is better than the status quo. And so in this model, it can also be described as like a journey from point A to point B. So point A would be where we are now, but something is not quite right in where we are now. And we're trying to get to point B, where the better outcome lies, the better future lies. And so the journey between point A and point B is the call to action. So if we sum it up, the story would start basically with a problem. Could be climate change, for example. That would be point A. Then point B would be the vision that we have of a better world, that a better world is possible. And then the third part would be the path for how we get from where we are now to the better world that we know is possible. And that's the call to action. So this is a very, very simple model. And I would say this one is probably the one that I use the most for making short social media videos at 350. This is the one that I think is kind of the backbone of most of our videos. It can apply to so many different types of stories, and it's a very simple model. And then finally, it's the third model is the public narrative framework. And this is a method that was developed by Marshall Ganz to use storytelling for social change. And it weaves together 3 stories into one single story. So the first part is the story of self. So that part is about me, about you. So why were you, or the protagonist of your story, why are you personally called to this mission? So if we're speaking about the climate crisis, what is it that, are there events in your life, maybe in your childhood or maybe more recently, but is there something that you have experienced that made you want to become active and become take action on the climate crisis? So the next part would be the story of us. So it's why us. So why is our community, so not just me, but like my whole community, why are we called to mobilize around this issue? And what are our shared values? What are our shared goals? What are our strengths? This is where you would tell the story of your community. And then finally, in the third part, it's the story of now. And this is the part where it establishes the urgency that we need to take action. And this is where you have your call to action to motivate your audience to join your movement and become engaged. And then all these three components would be woven into one single story. So aside from these three models that I just discussed, good storytelling can also be just boiled down to two essential elements. The first one is the power of the anecdote. So what is an anecdote? It's basically when we tell a sequence of events. It's basically a story where we say, first, this thing happened, then this other thing happened, and then that led to something else. And the simplicity of just moving through a series of events is something that as humans we were kind of like wired to respond to. So it's a very powerful thing. The second essential element is the power of the bait. And the bait is kind of can be described as the questions and the emotions that your story raises that keep you invested in the story. So they keep you wanting to know more. So if you think of like the last time you read a really, really good book and you couldn't put it down and you stayed up, maybe you stayed up late at night to read it and it was a real page turner, that story had a really good bait because it made you want to keep reading it. So I'm going to play now just a short 2-minute video, and sorry because the image quality is quite bad, but just listen to the audio. It's Ira Glass, who is the producer of This American Life, which is a radio show, and he's really a master storyteller. And so he goes into a little bit more detail about the power of the anecdote and the power of the bait.
In broadcasting, I think you have two basic building blocks, and they're very powerful, and you can use them as you will. And one is the anecdote. And an anecdote is literally just a sequence of actions. If you think of it as just like, what is a story in its purest form? A story in its purest form is somebody saying, this happened, and that led to this next thing, and that led to this next thing, and that led to this next thing, like one thing following another. And some of the things in the sequence can be, and that made me think of this, and then I said this. Like there could be thoughts and ideas as part of it, but like one is leading to the next, leading to the next. And the power of the anecdote is so great that no matter how, in a way, like no matter how boring the material is, if it's in a story form where there's an anecdote happening, and then he said this to me, and then I went here, and then I came downstairs, and I thought, like, what the hell? Like, it has a momentum in and of itself that no matter how boring the facts are, like I'm trying to think like okay, there's if you try to think like the most boring possible story, okay, there's a guy and he wakes up and he's lying in bed and the house is very, very quiet, just unearthly quiet. And so he sits up and he puts his feet on the floor and he walks to the door of his bedroom and again, just very, very quiet. Walks down the stairs, looks around, just unusually quiet. Now, like this is like what I'm telling you is the most boring possible fact pattern, and yet there's suspense in it. It feels like something's going to happen, and the reason why is because literally it's a sequence of events. Like this guy is doing this thing, he's moving from space to space. You can feel through its form that when you have one thing leading to the next, leading to the next, you can feel inherently that you're on a train that has a destination and that he's going to find something. So that's one of your building blocks. The other thing that little anecdote has is that it's raising a question from the beginning. And that's the other thing that you want is you want bait. You want to constantly be raising questions. So in that little story, the bait is that the house is very quiet. And so the question hanging in the air is why? And it's implied that any question you raise, you're going to answer. The whole shape of a story is that you're throwing out questions to keep people watching or listening and then answering them along the way.
Okay, great. So I hope you could hear that audio all right. For me, this video really helped me because I think some of us are natural storytellers. You know, we all have a friend who's just a born storyteller. They're just, every story they tell is amazing. Some of us, we have to work at, you know, learning how to tell good stories. And for me, I really had to learn how to tell stories. And this particular video from Ira Glass really helped me. So that's why I wanted to share it with you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about a hook. So a hook is super important in our world today, because as we all know, we're surrounded by social media, which is flooded with so many videos, so many posts and photos, and so much content. And so you really only have a few seconds at the beginning of your video to hook your viewer before they continue scrolling to the next thing, right? Because that's just, we live in a scrolling culture. So you want to start your video with some kind of a hook. And there are all kinds of hooks. I'm just going to go over 6 examples. But you can come up with your own hooks, and I'm sure you're familiar with some other ones. But so yeah, let's look at these 6 examples. So number 1 would be like a powerful or shocking visual that makes people want to see more. Another type of hook would be a breaking story. So this just happened and we're sharing it with you, or this is in the process of happening right now. That's something that often hooks people. Another one would be what's called a listicle. And you're probably very familiar with this. It's when we say X number of things about a topic. So for example, 5 things you can do to reduce your water consumption, or 10 things you can do to save the planet. We've all seen those types of articles. And there's a reason people use that, is because it's very effective at grabbing people's attention. Another example of a hook would be an underreported story. So something that a powerful group of people, maybe like oil companies, or maybe, you know, could be anything, but a powerful group doesn't want you to see the story, but we're sharing it with you. That would be another example of a hook, because it keeps people wanting to, oh, okay, this is something special. Like I want to see what the story is. So example 5 would be like myth busting. So when you're providing the real story or the counter narrative. And I did miss, I did just see that in the chat, people responded to the first exercise where I asked you for a story that had impact on you. And Katrina, you said that for you, like a story that gives you a new perspective that you didn't think about, that is something that really had impact on you. So this kind of relates to some of these hooks as well. So a new perspective on something could be a hook and a way to get people engaged. And same with Afifa also wrote, when someone shares their personal experiences. So that's another way to get people interested, is by sharing your personal experience about something. We all know how popular selfie videos are. So those in a way are a way to share something personal. And then the last one, number 6, is the curiosity gap. So starting your video with something that makes people curious about something, like they want to know more about that thing. So again, these are just some examples. There are many more. So this is just an example of a video that used the listicle and some other hooks. So it actually combines 4 different hooks. So the first one is 5 facts George Osborne doesn't want you to know. So they're using the listicle there. Then they're using another hook, which actually I didn't talk about, but X versus Y. So George Osborne versus you. George Osborne doesn't want you to know about. So that's a kind of a hook as well. There's also the element in this one of a breaking story. So George Osborne doesn't want you to know about his controversial plan to build a new nuclear power plant that you might not have heard about because nobody's talking about it. It's a new thing. So that would be kind of a breaking story element. And then there's also the hook of the underreported story. So George Osborne doesn't want you to know this, but we're going to tell you. So that's another example of that hook. Okay, so when we tell stories to win a campaign, it really helps to set clear goals about what you want to achieve. So one of the first questions you can ask yourself is, who do I want to hear my story? So who do you want to hear your story? Think about your audience. Another one is, what do you want people to do specifically after they watch your video? Do you want them to attend a rally? Do you want them to sign a petition? Do you want them to join your organization? Do you want to just change their perspective on something? So really try to think about what you want your video to achieve. And it's one of the things I always ask my colleagues at 350, whenever they ask me for a video, that's the first question I ask them. Okay, sure, you want a video, great, but what is your goal? What do you want to achieve with this video that maybe it couldn't be achieved in another way through a regular social media post? Then you want to ask yourself, how will you get your story to reach its desired audience? So how will you get your video out there? How will you get people to see it? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later when we talk a little bit about distribution. And then finally, it's good to ask yourself, how will you measure the impact of your video? Is it through the number of views? Like if it gets a lot of views on social media or YouTube? Is it the number of signatures that maybe were added to your petition? There are lots of different ways that you can measure the impact of a video, and it's a good thing to think about because it will help you make better videos as you continue to make them. Oh, and it's also important to keep in mind that sometimes it's really hard to measure the success of a video, and that's okay. That's normal. It's not always easy to measure the success of a video. So, all right. So I just wanted to show an example of a short 1-minute video. And I wanted to show this video because it's a good example of the public narrative framework that we talked about earlier, that has those 3 stories that are combined into one, starting with the story of self. So why me, the story of us, why my community, and the call to action. So, and this should have Spanish subtitles right in it.
I've lived in St. James my whole life.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm just gonna set up the subtitles for you. Okay, sorry about that. Let's start again.
I've lived in St. James my whole life. My grandfather was a farmer turned civil rights activist. He was the president of the NAACP on the West Bank. My mother is a school teacher turned environmental justice activist. This fight is in my blood. Before these petrochemical plants came into St. James Parish, we had a post office, we had convenience stores, we had our own high school, we had homes, people lived here. Our communities have been auctioned off to the highest bidder, but people are more important than profit. These plants are put in poor Black communities because they are going to receive the least amount of resistance. But the resistance has started, and we're not going to stop. A misunderstanding that people have is that we are against jobs, we're against families, and we're not. We're not. We want jobs that are not going to pollute the water, that are not going to pollute the air. That's what we want. Climate justice is racial justice. Text ASAP to 43464 to tell Congress to act on climate and invest in a just and equitable future for all.
Okay, Great. So hopefully you saw a little example of this. She started off with the story of self. So she has lived in St. James her whole life. She talked a little bit about her grandmother, her grandfather, and then she talked about the story of us, how her community has had to deal with these oil and gas extractive projects and the racism of those projects being always put in Black communities. And then at the end, there's a call to action, and it's a very specific call to action. Text, this and this to this number to tell Congress. So it's a very specific call to action. Okay. I see that, yes, someone put a comment about the hooks. There are hooks for those companies that use natural resources to the maximum. For example, water, and these businessmen pollute a lot with the product they make. To win over society, they enter into environmental orientation campaigns to ward off possible allegations that could be used against them for their behavior. So I think if I'm understanding that correctly, Etienne, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, is also pointing out that companies also use hooks as well. So hopefully that's what, and correct me if I understood it wrong, but yeah, it is important to identify all the places where hooks are used, because they can also be used, yeah, in a sneaky way sometimes. Okay, oops, I just went 2 slides ahead. So what I'd like you to do now, and I'll just I'll give you a few minutes to do this in silence, is that I'd like you to think about your personal story. So the why me part of the public narrative framework. So it's just a short exercise, but think about events that have happened in your life, or things that have influenced you, that have made you want to take action around the climate crisis. Like, what is it in your own personal life that made you engage in this issue? So hopefully maybe you have a pen and paper and you want to jot down some notes, or just take a few moments to just think about it. And I'll give you like 2 or 3 minutes. And then if anyone would like to share their personal story, no pressure, you don't have to, but if you'd like to share it with us, either in spoken word, via audio, or via the chat, would be lovely. So I'll just mute myself for 2 minutes and we'll come back. Okay, so did I give you enough time? If you need a bit more time, just let me know in the chat. And would anyone like to share their story about why you got involved in climate activism? And you can just jump right in and just unmute yourself and speak if you want to contribute something. Okay, no pressure. It's something, you know, you can continue thinking about this after the workshop. And actually, I would encourage you to go even further, and after the workshop, think about, so first think about what is your personal story, and then what is the story of your community? So why us? The story about why is this urgent right now? And then to try and bring those three elements together into one story. Okay, great. I see some stories in the chat box. I'm going to start with Katrina's because it's in English, and maybe if the interpreters could help me translate the one from Puerto Rico, that would be great. So Katrina says, I'm Katrina, and though I was born and named before one of the most infamous hurricanes of all time, I heard this as a clear sign that my role as a youth environmental advocate was relevant. I will continue to do my best to learn, grow, and evolve with guidance from my community, the data, and the heart that connects me to the world. That's wonderful, Katrina. That's a lovely personal story. That's so interesting that it relates specifically to your name. Okay, so Etienne, and sorry, I'm pronouncing it. I don't know how to pronounce it in Spanish, but I'm Francophone, and in French we say Etienne, so I might be saying it wrong. I apologize. So he says, in the case of Puerto Rico, the government has been illegally granting permits to allow construction in the maritime terrestrial zones, impacting the beaches to leave them for the use of a few wealthy or well-off people. In Puerto Rico, the beaches are public. That means they belong to the people, and the government wants to violate this. To avoid this, we are raising the alarm through demonstrations and education. So that's wonderful. So I would say that that is more the story of us, so the story of community. And what I would encourage you to do is to go back before the story of community and think about you personally. In your personal life, what motivates you? Like, is it something maybe like beaches are, maybe you have a close relationship with the ocean, or maybe, you know, it could be anything, but I think people are always curious to know what it is about someone that made them personally choose to get involved. So, but this is a wonderful example of the next step, which is the community aspect. Why us? Why my community? So that's great. Okay, thank you so much for sharing, you guys. So now we're going to move into some basic videography skills, and I'm going to focus on this from the perspective of using your phones, just because I think that's one of the easiest ways that, and what a lot of people seem to be doing nowadays, but these will also apply to a video camera as well. So, but I think first I just wanted to let you know that you don't need a video camera, you don't need fancy equipment, that if you have a phone that films video, then you can make amazing videos just using your phone. So starting tips about using your phone. The first thing I always tell people is clean your lens, because we put our phones in our pockets, we put them on our kitchen tables, we put our fingers on the lenses. And so I guarantee you that if you look at your phone lens, it'll probably have a little smear of grease or something on it. So the first thing to do is just to gently wipe it with a soft cloth. I often just use my t-shirt, that's fine. But just make sure your lens is clean, because it will give you a poor image quality. The next thing is check how much storage you have on your phone, because there's nothing worse than you're filming something, it's really great, somebody is saying something really interesting, and then you run out of space and you have to delete things really quickly. I've been in that situation and it's very frustrating. So make sure you have storage on your phone. And then it's a good idea to maybe put your phone in airplane mode to avoid like beeps and notifications if you get a text coming in or other alerts. And then finally, like, I would encourage you to check your settings on your phone for the video, for your camera on your phone. So if you go into settings, the first option is you'll see that you have the choice between high efficiency or most compatible. And either one is fine, either one works. But if you have a lot of storage space on your phone, then I recommend going with clicking the most compatible option, because that will give you the best quality. The high efficiency is also good quality, it's fine, but there'll be smaller files, so they'll take up less space. So if you don't have a lot of storage space on your phone, then choose the high efficiency option. So that's the first little black box that you see there. If you go on to the second little black box, you'll see that it gives you different options. The main one that you want to look at is where it says formats. So you would click on formats, and then it will give you, if you see in the third box, it will give you different video format options. The three at the bottom, 4K, are the highest quality video. I almost never use them, because when you're making a video for social media or for online, it doesn't have to be like amazing quality. As long as it's basically good quality, that's enough, because 4K takes up more storage space on your phone. So I usually select the second option, where you see it says 1080p HD at 30 FPS, and FPS stands for frames per second. And it's 30 frames per second is going to give you a look that looks more like film than video. And I think it's a more artistic look. I think it's a nicer look than the 60 frames per second option. So these are personal choices. You can choose the one that works best for you, but this is how I configure my phone when I'm filming video. Okay, I wanted to go over the 4 stages of video making, and these are 4 stages that are basically the same, whether you're making a big Hollywood movie or whether you're making a video for social media on your phone. So there are 4 basic stages to any video. The first one is what's called pre-production, and this is where you're planning your video. So you might do a little bit of research. You might write a script for it. You might want to schedule the filming if there are people involved, interviews, and also you're preparing your equipment. So you're charging your phone, making sure the battery's full, you're checking your storage and all the things that I mentioned previously. So that's pre-production. The next stage is production, which is just the actual filming of your project. The next stage is post-production, and this refers to the editing. And you don't always need to edit. So for some phone videos, you might not need to edit at all. In fact, some of the best social media videos out there are not even edited. So don't worry about editing if you don't want to do it, or you haven't done it before. You don't need to do it necessarily. The next step is distribution, and that's getting your video seen. So you want to give your video the best chance to be seen and shared and to deliver impact. and change. That should say change there. It says chance, but that's a little typo I made. All right, so moving on. I wanted to go over some things that you should think about when you're making a video. The first one is location. So you might want to consider choosing a location that gives some context or reflects something about the person that is speaking. So for example, if I am a farmer, then you might want to film me in front of my farm, in front of my crops, my vegetables. That's just a basic example, but yeah, it's nice to think about where you want to do your filming in relation to the topic or the person that is speaking. And then you want to choose a well-lit and a quiet location so that there's not a lot of audio that is interfering, especially if you're speaking or you're filming someone else who's speaking. Next is the framing. So you first need to decide whether you're going to film a vertical video or horizontal video. And nowadays, yeah, you could go either way, but the vertical videos are doing a lot better on Instagram and TikTok. So at 350, we are moving more and more towards vertical videos. For framing, you want to be not too far, not too close. So, just right, maybe a few feet away. You might want to consider the rule of thirds, which is a principle in photography where basically if you divide your frame into 2 lines in either direction, the point where those lines intersect, that is an area of the frame that the eye is naturally drawn to. So a lot of photographers use this principle to frame their photos, same with video. And it's just a way to work with where the human eye is naturally drawn to in a frame. So here you see the example of the young man. His eyes are almost in one of those 4 points. So it can be any one of the 4 points where there's an intersection of lines. But don't worry too much about this. It's something that you may want to think about. But okay. So the next one is lighting. You want to make sure to keep your light source in front of your subject, or also to the side is okay. To the side gives a little bit more drama to your image because there'll be some shadow in the face. But if the light is behind the subject, then you'll see in the first example, we can barely see the little girl's face, right? It's almost completely in the shadow. So try to stick to having the light in front of your subject, or a little bit on the side is fine too. And then you want to think about the power of your light. If you're filming at noon under a really bright sun, the light will be very harsh and there'll be a lot of shadows. So soft light is often better for filming. So that's why a lot of photographers and videographers really love to film in the morning or in the evening, because the light is really beautiful at that time of day. Finally, shot stability is very important. So just make sure to hold your phone very still. Sometimes what I do is I actually like brace my elbow like this so that my arm is nice and stable. If you have a tripod or a selfie stick, like in the photo, that's great. Definitely use it because it will help stabilize your shot. And then try not to use the zoom function on your phone. So, when you kind of zoom in like this, try not to do that. If you need to get closer, just walk over, just move closer to your subject, because when you zoom in, it creates instability in your shot and there'll be a lot more, your footage will be a lot more shaky. And then finally, audio is super important. So make sure that your subject is not too far from the phone. Choose a quiet place where there's not a lot of competing noises. And if you have a little phone microphone, definitely use it, because those can be really, really useful. So just try not to film someone, like don't do an interview of someone that's further than 6 feet away. The audio will be really poor. I almost guarantee it. So try to stay really close, whether it's yourself or whether it's someone else. Try to stay close to your subject. Okay, and then quickly, because we're getting close to the hour, so selfie video styles, these are 3 different styles you might want to consider. One is like anecdotal or off the cuff, where you're just speaking naturally about a topic. This is usually more dynamic to watch, but sometimes it helps to write a script, because it helps you keep your message very focused and to keep you from rambling for too long. So it keeps your video nice and short. But what you want to be careful of with script is that you're not delivering it in a robotic way. So maybe practice it a few times, pretend you're speaking to a friend or someone you know and care about, so that it sounds more natural. And then another style is the interview, which can be really powerful to get spontaneous stories. You want to ask open-ended questions. So that means avoid yes or no questions, so that you get your subjects talking. But the thing about interviews is they often need to be edited, because people will speak for quite a long time. And so just keep that in mind, that when you do an interview, it'll probably be quite long, so you'll probably need to edit it down. So some editing tips really quickly. Well, the first thing, as I already said, videos don't always need to be edited. So don't worry if you don't want to edit. If you do choose to edit, try to be really ruthless. So only keep the best moments of what you filmed. Because unless it's a really, really super interesting story, short videos usually do best on social media. So try to keep it between 1 to 2 minutes maximum. You might want to add text and titles to your video. If you do that, keep it really short and really simple, because people don't have a lot of time to read text on video. And I see people make that mistake a lot on social media videos, where there's a lot of text in the video and you don't have time to read it before it moves to the next shot. So keep titles nice and short. Make sure there's a call to action at the end of your video. It can be either spoken call to action, or it can be written using text and titles. And then there are a lot of different apps that are available for video editing. You can do a Google search to find one that works for you. There are a lot of free ones, and there are some that cost a little bit of money. So there's lots of options. One of the easiest options is probably just to use the in-app editing tools. So for example, Instagram Reels has a really great editing program. It takes a little while to get used to it and to use it, but it's very user-friendly, it's free, and it's right in Instagram. So I recommend doing that if you have that option. Okay, so finally, distribution, so sharing your story. So these are some different ways that you can share your story: a post on social media, a newsletter, a letter to the editor, talking points for a video presentation. It could be even, you could include a video in a letter to your elected representatives. You could include a video in an email to your friends. You could submit your video to a film festival, even if you want. So there are lots of, and these are just some of them, but there are lots of different ways that you can share your video. And these are some of the platforms that are great for video sharing. So YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. It could be, you could embed your video in a website. You could share it in an email or newsletter. You could share it via a blog post. So now I want to go over a little exercise that you can do after this workshop if you'd like, which is to film a message for our Power Up, for 350's Power Up mobilization, which is going to be in November. This is just optional, of course, but if you feel like this workshop was helpful and you want to practice, then we would love for you to submit your videos to us. So what is Power Up? It's a mobilization, a global mobilization that will take place November 3 and to the 4th. And people will come together to power up the global renewable energy revolution. And if you want to learn more, the website is there. So I encourage you to check it out and get involved. So basically, we're looking for videos for Power Up. They should be under 20 seconds long. And here you'll see a list of prompts that you could use to help you with your video. And I believe that Afifa will be sharing these slides with you. And we can also send you this part of the slides for sure, so that you can refer back to it. And then, yeah, when you're done your video, just email it to video@350.org, and we'll probably include it in our global promotional video to promote participation in Power Up. All right, so are there any questions? I know I went through a lot of information and I had hoped to stop along the way to ask if there were questions, but we were a bit short on time. So does anyone have any questions? You can either just speak up or write them in the chat. Oh, Katrina, you submitted your Power Up video. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's great. Great. Okay, well, I really hope that the workshop was useful. I hope that it will help you with your video work and storytelling work. And I hope to see some of your videos for the Power Up project. I'll hand it back to you, Afifa.
Thanks so much, Ope. It was a really great session, and I especially loved the video from Ira Glass because I was definitely hooked on what was happening. Like, what's gonna happen next? Like, just walk in. It was so short, but I was hooked and I wanted to know what was gonna happen in that story. So definitely a great example of how to use those types of hooks and the narrative in our storytelling. And I just want to say thanks so much for being willing and available to facilitate this session for us. I will definitely be sharing the slides with everyone tomorrow, along with the recording, so that you can review if you like. And I'm hoping to see some great videos for Power Up, but also for any other projects that you do within the network or your organizations in the Caribbean. So thanks so much for joining us. And yeah, take care. Bye, everyone.